The camera recorded everything. And guess who the thief was? The footage was crystal clear, playing on a loop on my laptop screen. A silent, damning movie of my own betrayal. It showed a figure moving with a familiar, stealthy grace through the moonlit shadows of my bedroom. A figure who knew the exact location of the false panel at the back of my walk-in closet. A figure who had hugged me goodnight just hours earlier. Her voice sweet as honey. It was my daughter-in-law, Chloe. Her face, illuminated by the faint glow of her phone flashlight, was a mask of cold, calculated greed as she lifted my mother's diamond necklace, my grandmother's sapphire brooch, and the pearl earrings my late husband, Robert, had given me on our wedding day. She tucked them all into a velvet pouch, slid the panel back into place, and vanished from the room as silently as she had arrived. My blood turned to ice in my veins. This wasn't a random burglary. This was a violation orchestrated by the woman I had welcomed into my family. I had known something was wrong the moment I woke up. The air in the house felt disturbed. A deep, primal instinct, the kind you develop after 72 years on this earth, told me I had been violated. When I saw the empty space where my jewelry box usually sat, a cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. But it was the discovery of the hidden panel, slightly ajar, that confirmed my worst fears. This was an inside job. The police officer who came to take the report was polite but dismissive. A sophisticated burglary, Mrs. Pendleton, he'd said, noting the lack of forced entry. They knew what they were looking for. Probably cased the joint. We'll see what we can do. I knew what he was thinking. A forgetful old woman. Maybe she misplaced them. Maybe she's confused. But I wasn't confused. I was furious. And I was prepared. Robert, God rest his soul, had been paranoid about security after a break-in on our street years ago. He'd had state-of-the-art miniature cameras installed in the most unlikely of places. Inside a smoke detector, the base of a table lamp, and the left eye of the old, worn teddy bear that sat on the armchair in the corner of my bedroom. A bear he had won for me at a county fair 50 years ago. A bear everyone, including Chloe, thought was just a sentimental piece of junk. Subscribe for more stories of hidden truths and shocking betrayals. I didn't say a word to anyone, not to my son Mark, who would be devastated and likely confront Chloe in a blind rage, giving her the chance to spin a web of lies. And certainly not to Chloe, whose performance of sympathy when she heard the terrible news was worthy of an Academy Award. Oh, Eleanor, your mother's necklace. Those were priceless. How could someone do this? She had wailed, pulling me into a hug that made my skin crawl. I played my part, the trembling, vulnerable victim. I let her make me tea, let her fuss over me, all while the USB drive with the evidence burned a hole in my pocket. I needed to know why. Was it for drug money? Gambling debts? Or was it something even more vile? I had to be smart. I had to be a detective. I began to watch her, this woman who had stolen my history, with the cold, focused eyes of a predator. I noticed the new designer handbag she casually carried a week later, a bag I knew cost more than Mark's monthly salary. When I complimented it, her smile was a little too tight. Oh, this old thing! A lucky find at a consignment shop. She lied smoothly. I just nodded, a gentle, believing smile on my face. The game was on. I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was a spider, patiently waiting for the fly to entangle itself further in my web. I started digging, my hands trembling not with age, but with a ferocious need for justice. I hired a discreet private investigator, a man named Silas, who didn't ask questions when I showed him the video and gave him Chloe's name. Find out everything? I told him. Her finances, her secrets, everything. The wait for his report was agony, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, a reminder that a viper was nesting in my family tree. When the email finally arrived, its contents were more shocking than I could have ever imagined. Silas's report was a masterpiece of devastation. It wasn't just about stolen jewelry to fund a lavish habit. It was a blueprint of a double life. Chloe wasn't just a thief. She was a con artist, the woman my son had married. The woman who had eaten at my table and called me Mom was a fiction. Her real name was Chloe Miller, not the more sophisticated Chamberlain she had adopted. She had a record: petty theft, forgery, and a dismissed charge of embezzlement from a previous employer where she'd worked as a receptionist. But the most chilling revelation was the man. There was another man. Not an affair, Silas clarified, but a partner. A man named Dominic Russo, a small-time criminal with a history of fencing stolen goods. They were a team. Chloe would identify the targets, vulnerable, wealthy, older people, ingratiate herself, and then orchestrate the perfect, unsolable theft. I was their latest mark. My son was their unwitting pawn. The jewelry wasn't for a new handbag. It was a business transaction. The handbag was just a bonus, a little treat for a job well done. The report included grainy photos of Chloe meeting with Dominic at a secluded downtown cafe, laughing over coffee, his hand resting on hers in a gesture that was far from professional. I felt a fresh wave of nausea. This was so much bigger, so much more cold-blooded than I had initially thought. She wasn't just a greedy young woman. She was a predator, and my family was her hunting ground. I couldn't go to the police yet. With her record, she'd likely get a plea deal, a short sentence, and she'd be out to destroy someone else's life. And what about Mark? He was blindly in love. Showing him the report and the video would break him. But would he even believe it? She would have a story, a reason, a way to twist it all. She'd say the video was faked, that Silas was a liar I had hired to break them up, that Dominic was just an old friend. No, I needed irrefutable, undeniable proof. I needed a confession. I decided to host a dinner, a small, intimate family dinner to celebrate my recovery from the traumatic robbery. I would be the picture of resilient grace. I would set the stage for her downfall. The guest list was small. Mark, Chloe, and myself. I cooked Mark's favorite meal, a slow-braised pot roast that filled the house with a comforting, familial aroma. I even brought out Robert's best Bordeaux. I needed everything to feel safe, familiar, and utterly unsuspecting. Chloe arrived, all smiles and false concern. The stolen pearls I had specifically mentioned missing now dangling from her ears. The audacity stole my breath for a moment. She was wearing my stolen property to a dinner in my home. It was a power move, a silent taunt. She thought she was untouchable. She thought I was a fool. I smiled wider, pouring the wine. "Those are beautiful earrings, Chloe," I remarked, my voice light as air. "Oh, thank you. They were a gift from Mark for our anniversary," she said, without missing a beat, reaching over to squeeze my son's hand. Mark, my poor duped son, beamed with pride. The lie was so effortless, so brazen, that it took every ounce of my willpower not to fling the glass of Bordeaux in her face. I simply nodded, a knowing look in my eyes that she, in her arrogance, completely missed. The trap was set. The first course was served. The conversation was light, filled with Mark's stories from work and Chloe's vapid chatter about interior design trends. I waited until the main course was finished, until the wine had loosened their inhibitions, and the atmosphere was warm and relaxed. Then I gently tapped my knife against my glass. "I have a little announcement," I said, my voice sweet. "I've decided I'm not going to let that awful robbery define me. In fact, I've decided to make a change. I'm going to liquidate a large portion of my assets." I let that hang in the air. Chloe's fork froze midway to her mouth. "Liquidate?" she asked, her voice a little too eager. "Yes," I continued. "Stocks, bonds, and I've decided to sell the house." "The house?" Mark exclaimed, looking shocked. "Mom, you love this house." "I know, dear, but it's too big for me. And with the proceeds," I said, looking directly at Chloe, "I've decided to take a large portion and give it to you two. An early inheritance, a cash gift, so you can buy a bigger home, start a family, without financial worry." The greed in Chloe's eyes was a physical thing, a hungry, gleaming light. She was practically salivating. This was a prize far beyond some old jewelry. This was the motherlode. That's incredibly generous, Eleanor," she breathed, her voice trembling with genuine emotion for the first time all night. "There is one condition," I said, my tone shifting slightly, the warmth leaching away. "It's a matter of principle for me. After the robbery, I can't stand the thought of dishonesty. So I need you both to take a lie detector test. A simple formality, administered by a professional I trust, just to ensure there are no hidden surprises, no secret debts, nothing that could jeopardize this gift." I made it sound so reasonable, so prudent. Mark, ever the honest boy, shrugged. "Of course, Mom. Whatever you need. I have nothing to hide." He looked at Chloe. Her face had gone as white as the tablecloth. The blood had drained from her lips. Her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. A lie detector test?" she stammered. That's so invasive. Don't you trust us? With a sum this large, Chloe, it's not about trust. It's about due diligence. Surely you understand. Unless, of course, you have something you're afraid will be revealed, I asked. My head tilted, my gaze innocent. The noose was tightening. I could see the panic setting in. She was calculating, her mind racing for a way out. She couldn't say no without looking guilty, but she couldn't say yes without being exposed. It was a perfect, inescapable box. I need to use the restroom, she whispered, pushing her chair back so abruptly it screeched against the hardwood floor. She practically ran from the dining room. I gave her a 30-second head start. I turned to Mark, whose face was a confused frown. "What was that about?" he asked. "Let's go find out," I said calmly, picking up my laptop from the sideboard. I led my bewildered son out of the dining room and to the foot of the stairs. From the hallway below, we could hear her frantic, hushed voice in the upstairs bathroom. She was on the phone. The old house carried sound perfectly. "Dominic, it's me. It's all gone to hell. The crazy old bat wants us to take a lie detector test for an inheritance. I don't know. We have to disappear. We have to get the jewelry and get out of the country. Meet me at the usual place in an hour. We'll cash it all in and be on the first flight to anywhere." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at my son. The color had drained from his face. The confusion in his eyes had shattered, replaced by a dawning, horrifying comprehension. The world he knew was collapsing around him. I didn't say a word. I simply opened my laptop, queued up the video from the teddy bear, and pressed play. I watched as he saw his wife, the love of his life, steal from his mother. I watched his heart break in real time. The proof was no longer just on a screen. It was echoing in the frantic whispers from the bathroom above us. The thief had been caught, and the revelation was more bone-chilling than I had ever imagined. The silence in the hallway was a physical weight, broken only by the frantic, muffled sobs coming from the bathroom upstairs. Mark stood frozen, his face a ghostly mask of shock and devastation. He looked from the laptop screen, where his wife was forever frozen in the act of betrayal, to me, his eyes pleading for it all to be a nightmare. I simply closed the laptop with a soft, final click. The evidence had been presented. The verdict was in. I placed a hand on his arm, feeling the tense, trembling muscle beneath his sleeve. "Go into the study, Mark," I whispered, my voice low and steady. "Wait for me there. Do not let her see you." He was a statue, unblinking. "Mark," I said a little more firmly. That broke his trance. He gave a jerky, helpless nod and stumbled toward the study, a man walking to his own execution. As soon as the study door clicked shut, I moved. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and called up, my voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Chloe, darling, are you quite all right? You've been up there a long time. Is everything okay?" The sobbing from the bathroom ceased instantly. There was a long pause, then the sound of a flush and running water. I'm fine, Eleanor," her voice called back, strained but trying for normalcy. "Just a sudden stomach cramp. Must be something I ate." "Oh, you poor dear," I cooed, layering on the sympathy. "Why don't you come down and have some peppermint tea? It will settle your stomach. We can talk about this silly test another time." I needed to lure her out. I needed to see the face of a cornered rat. A few moments later, the bathroom door opened and she descended the stairs. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red-rimmed, but she had composed herself into a mask of pained apology. She was good. I had to give her that. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor, Mark," she began, her gaze darting towards the empty dining room. "Where's Mark?" "He's just getting more wine from the cellar," I lied smoothly, guiding her by the elbow back toward the dining room. It was a risk, but I was counting on her panic and greed to override her caution. "Now about that test. I can see it upset you. We can forget all about it." Her shoulders slumped with visible relief. "Oh, thank you. It just felt so distrustful." "I understand completely," I said, pouring her a fresh cup of tea from the pot I had brought in earlier. "It was an old woman's foolish notion. Let's just enjoy the rest of our evening. The inheritance is yours. No strings attached." I watched her closely as I said the words. The greed flashed in her eyes again, bright and unmistakable, momentarily eclipsing the panic. She was already mentally spending the money. She took a sip of the tea, her hand still trembling slightly. "Thank you, Eleanor. That means the world to us." She was already rebuilding the facade, piece by piece. "Of course, dear," I said, my smile benign. "Family is everything." I let the silence stretch for a moment, then leaned forward conspiratorially. "You know, with all this talk of the robbery and now this inheritance, it's made me think about security. Robert had the most elaborate system installed, you know. Cameras everywhere." Her teacup rattled in its saucer. "See cameras?" "Oh, yes," I said airily, waving a hand. "Hidden in the most peculiar places. He was so paranoid. There's one in the smoke detector in the hall, one in the base of that lamp." I paused, letting my gaze drift around the room before landing squarely on her. "He even hid one in the teddy bear in my bedroom. Can you imagine? The silly old thing. He said no one would ever think to look there." Chloe's face went from pale to a sickly, greenish white. She stared at me, her eyes wide with dawning absolute horror. The pieces were crashing together in her mind. The specific mention of the theft, the sudden lie detector test, the revelation of the camera. She knew that I knew. The velvet pouch of jewelry felt like a lead weight in her pocket, or perhaps tucked into her bra. I could almost see it burning her through her clothes. I think I need to go," she stammered, pushing back from the table so violently her chair fell backward with a crash. "I'm not feeling well at all. So soon?" I asked, my voice dripping with false disappointment. "But Mark will be so sad to have missed you. He just texted me from the cellar." I held up my phone, a blank screen facing her. "He said he found a bottle of Robert's, 47 port. He's so excited to share it with you." It was a lie on top of a lie, a spider's web of deception designed to disorient her. She was breathing in short, ragged gasps now, true panic setting in. She wasn't thinking about the inheritance anymore. She was thinking about prison. She was thinking about Dominic. Tell him I had to go. An emergency. A friend is in trouble." She turned and fled from the dining room, grabbing her purse from the hall console and wrenching the front door open. She didn't look back. I stood and walked calmly to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to watch her. She fumbled with her keys, dropping them twice before finally unlocking her car, a sleek little convertible. A gift I now suspected from her criminal partner. She peeled out of the driveway, the tires screeching in the quiet suburban night. Subscribe for more stories of hidden truths and shocking betrayals. The moment her taillights disappeared, the study door opened. Mark stood there, looking older than I had ever seen him. He had heard everything. "She's meeting him," he said, his voice a hollow monotone. "She's going to get the jewelry and run." "Yes," I said, turning to face him. The gentle mother was gone, replaced by the general planning her final campaign. "And we are going to follow her." "Mom, we should call the police," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He was still in shock, his worldview shattered. "And tell them what?" I asked gently. "That my daughter-in-law, who I just gifted a large inheritance, ran out of my house after I vaguely implied I might have a security camera. They'll do nothing. We need the proof. We need to catch her with Dominic and the stolen goods. We need to hear her admit it." I walked over to him, placing my hands on his shoulders. "Mark, I know this is hell, but we have to see this through. For you, for your future, so you never have a single doubt about what she is." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the little boy who used to believe in superheroes. That boy was gone, but a grim, determined man was emerging from the wreckage. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Okay, let's go." We took my car, an unassuming sedan that wouldn't stand out. I drove, my hand steady on the wheel, while Mark navigated on his phone, his jaw clenched so tight I feared his teeth would crack. He had installed a tracking app on Chloe's phone months ago. A joking safety measure after she'd gotten lost hiking. She had laughed it off, never thinking to disable it. Now, it was our guiding star, a blinking dot moving steadily toward the industrial side of the city. We parked in the shadows of a derelict warehouse, across the street from a grimy, neon-lit bar called The Rusty Nail. Chloe's car was already there, parked next to a black motorcycle. "That's his," Mark said, his voice tight. "The bike. I've seen pictures on his social media." We didn't have to wait long. A few minutes later, the door to the bar opened and Chloe emerged, followed by a tall, muscular man in a leather jacket. Dominic. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in their body language. They weren't embracing lovers. They were panicked partners in crime. We rolled down the windows just a crack. The night air was cold, carrying their voices to us with chilling clarity. "This is a mess, Chloe. A lie detector test? What were you thinking?" Dominic snarled, his voice a low growl. "I wasn't thinking. She sprung it on me." "But it's fine, it's fine." She called it off. "She's giving us the money anyway." "All of it!" Chloe's voice was shrill, desperate. "You believe that? The old bat knows. The camera in the teddy bear? That was a message. She knows." He grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her slightly. "We need to disappear now. Did you bring the stuff?" "Yes, I have it all right here," she said, patting her purse. "We can pawn it in the next state over. Be across the border by morning." "Give it to me," Dominic demanded, holding out his hand. "I'll handle the fence. You go get your things. Meet me at the spot we talked about." For a moment, Chloe hesitated, clutching her purse to her chest. It was a fleeting gesture of mistrust, a crack in their criminal partnership. All of it. "Maybe I should hold on to the pearls." "Don't be stupid," he snapped, snatching the purse from her. "This is my world, not yours. You just stick to playing the happy housewife until we're in the clear. Now go." It was all there. The admission, the stolen goods changing hands, the entire sordid plot. Next to me, Mark let out a low pained sound, a sob he choked back. He had heard his wife, the woman he loved, confirm every terrible truth. He pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking but determined, and started recording, zooming in on the two of them as Dominic rifled through the purse, pulling out the velvet pouch and inspecting its contents under the dim streetlight. We had them. We had it all. But as I watched Dominic shove Chloe toward her car and climb onto his motorcycle, a new, even more chilling thought occurred to me. He had the jewelry. He had the means to disappear. And Chloe? Chloe was now a loose end, a liability who knew his name, his face, and his operation. The way he had looked at her, it wasn't the look of a partner. It was the look of a man considering his options. And in his world, loose ends were often permanently tied up. The game wasn't over. It had just become infinitely more dangerous. The roar of Dominic's motorcycle faded into the hum of the city, a sound that was suddenly suffused with menace. Chloe stood alone under the flickering neon sign, watching him go. For a single heart-wrenching moment, her shoulders slumped, and the mask of the cunning conspirator fell away, revealing a lost, frightened girl. It was a glimpse of the person she might have been, buried deep beneath the greed and deception. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, she straightened up, squared her shoulders, and marched back to her car with a renewed, desperate purpose. She was going to follow his orders. She was going to run. "We have to stop her," Mark whispered from the passenger seat, his voice raw. The video on his phone had stopped recording, leaving us in the dim, silent car. "We have to call the police now, Mom. We have the evidence." I didn't take my eyes off Chloe's car as she pulled out of the parking lot with a spray of gravel. "We will, Mark, but not yet. Think, if we call them now, they'll pick her up at your house. She'll be arrested for theft and conspiracy, but Dominic will be long gone. He'll vanish, and he'll be free to do this to another family, to another son like you. He's the source of the poison. She's just a symptom." He turned to me, his face a conflict of agony and dawning understanding. What are you saying? We just let her go? No, I said, my voice low and steady as I started the car and pulled out, keeping a safe distance behind Chloe's red taillights. We follow her. She's our only link to him. She's panicked, she's scared, and she's gonna lead us right to their rendezvous point. We get them both, together with the jewelry. We end this completely. We trailed her through the sleeping city, a silent, grim procession. She didn't drive to the modern apartment she shared with Mark. Instead, she navigated to a shabby, low-budget motel on the edge of the highway, the Starlight Inn, where the set and the eye in the sign had burned out. She parked around the back, out of sight from the road. Mark let out a choked sound. She's been planning this. She has a go-bag here. She was always ready to run. The final piece of his heart broke then. I saw it happen. The last flicker of hope in his eyes extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. We watched from the shadows as a room light flicked on, the curtains drawn tight. What now? Mark asked, his hand already on the door handle. We confront her? Not yet, I said, placing a restraining hand on his arm. We wait for him. This is the spot. She's getting her things and she's waiting for his call. He's the one with the jewelry. He's the prize. The wait was interminable, each minute stretching into an eternity. The motel was a grim tableau of transient lives and quiet desperation. We sat in the dark, the only sound our breathing, and the occasional roar of a truck on the nearby highway. I watched my son's profile etched in the faint glow of the dashboard lights. He was staring at the motel room door, as if he could see through it, watching the ghost of his marriage pack its bags and prepare to vanish forever. After nearly an hour, a black sedan, not the motorcycle, pulled into the lot and parked a few spaces down from Chloe's car. Dominic got out. He was alone. He wasn't carrying the velvet pouch, but he had a small, heavy-looking duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't go to Chloe's room immediately. He stood by his car, lit a cigarette, and scanned the parking lot, his gaze predatory and cautious. We slunk down in our seats, our hearts pounding. He was checking his surroundings. He was making sure he wasn't followed. Satisfied, he tossed the cigarette and walked purposefully toward her room. He didn't knock. He used a key. He had his own key. The door opened and closed, swallowing him whole. Now, Mark said, his voice a guttural whisper. We call the police. We have them both. Wait, I said, a new chilling thought forming. Listen, we rolled down the windows again. The motel room walls were thin. At first, there was only the muffled sound of voices. Hers rising in a panicked question. His, a low, rumbling response. Then the voices grew louder, sharper. The jewelry, Dominic! Where is it? We need to sell it now. We need to go. Chloe's voice was shrill, edged with hysteria. Relax, will you? It's handled. His voice was a calm, oily smear. It's safe. I've got a better plan. What better plan? The plan was to run. The old woman knows. Her son knows. They have a video. The plan has changed, he said, and there was a new, terrifying quality to his tone. A flat, emotionless finality. The old lady is giving you a fortune, you said. A cash inheritance. No strings attached. That's a lot cleaner than pawning some old jewelry. There was a long dead silence from the room. Mark and I exchanged a horrified look. He was pivoting. He saw a bigger score. But that's mine. That's for us. Chloe stammered. Is it? Dominic's voice was a soft, dangerous purr. See, here's the thing, Chloe. You're a liability now. You're burned. That video connects you to the theft. It connects you to me. If you get caught, you'll roll over on me in a heartbeat to save your own skin. I can't have that. What are you saying? Her voice was a terrified whisper. I'm saying the inheritance doesn't need both of us. In fact, it's better with just one. A grieving widower, perhaps. Or a grieving daughter-in-law who tragically lost her husband. The implication hung in the cold night air, more poisonous than any toxin. He wasn't just a thief. He was a killer. He was considering killing my son to get the money. Mark made a move to get out of the car, a raw, animalistic sound of fury escaping his lips. I grabbed him, my grip surprisingly strong. "No, Mark, no. He's dangerous. We can't." Inside the room, the argument escalated. "You're crazy," Chloe shrieked. "I'm not letting you hurt Mark. I'm not a murderer." "Aren't you?" he sneered. "You've been stealing from a woman who treated you like a daughter. You've been lying to a man who loves you. What's the difference? It's all just taking what you want." There was a crash, the sound of something breaking, a struggle. "Give me my phone." "I'm calling him. I'm warning him," Chloe screamed. Then a sickening thud, followed by a cry of pain. Then silence, a profound, terrifying silence. The door to the motel room opened. Dominic stood there, silhouetted against the light. He looked left, then right, his posture tense. He was alone. He closed the door quietly behind him, got into his sedan, and drove away, calmly, as if he were just leaving a business meeting. Mark was out of the car before I could stop him, sprinting across the parking lot toward the motel room. "Chloe!" he yelled, his voice cracking. I scrambled after him, my old heart hammering against my ribs. A prayer on my lips that we weren't too late. He didn't bother with the key. He threw his shoulder against the flimsy wooden door, and it splintered open with a crash. The scene inside was one of chaos. A lamp was overturned. The room's single chair was smashed. And in the center of it all, Chloe lay on the floor, clutching her stomach, a trickle of blood from her lip. But she was alive. She was conscious. Her eyes, wide with terror and shock, met Mark's. He knelt beside her, his anger momentarily eclipsed by a primal, instinctual concern. "Chloe, are you okay?" "What did he do?" She looked up at him. The man she had betrayed. The man whose life her partner had just threatened. And something in her finally shattered. The last of her defenses crumbled into dust. The tears that came now weren't manipulative. They were real, born of pain and a horrifying self-awareness. He has the jewelry in the duffel bag. He's going to the old shipyards to meet his fence, a man named Vasily. She choked out between sobs, clutching Mark's arm. "He was going to leave me. He was going to hurt you, Mark. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." It was the confession. It was the full, unvarnished truth, spilled onto the dirty motel carpet. Mark looked from her battered face to mine, his own a landscape of devastation and resolve. We had our confession. We had the location. We had the name. The game was no longer about revenge. It was about survival. "Call the police, Mark," I said, my voice ringing with an authority I hadn't used in years. "Tell them everything. And tell them there's an armed and dangerous man at the shipyards, about to fence stolen goods. Tell them he just assaulted a woman and threatened a murder." I looked down at Chloe, who was weeping in my son's arms. "And tell them we have a witness." The next hour was a controlled, high-stakes blur. Mark's call to 911 was a masterpiece of frantic yet precise information. "My wife has been assaulted at the Starlight Inn. The suspect is armed, dangerous, and he's on his way to the old shipyards right now to sell stolen jewelry. He threatened to kill me. His name is Dominic Russo. He's meeting a man named Vasily." He gave the address, the description of the car, everything. I stood guard over Chloe, who had curled into a fetal position on the floor, her sobs now silent, shuddering things. The police and paramedics arrived in a symphony of sirens and flashing lights that painted the grim motel in pulses of red and blue. While paramedics checked Chloe, a detective, a sharp-eyed woman named Inspector Miller, took our initial statements. I handed over my laptop. "The original theft is on here," I said, my voice weary but clear. "And my son recorded their conversation in the parking lot of the Rusty Nail." Mark transferred the video. The evidence was a damning unbroken chain from my bedroom to this filthy motel room. Inspector Miller's radio crackled to life. "Team Alpha in position at the shipyards. We have visual on the suspect and a second male. They are engaged in a transaction, awaiting the go-ahead. Move in," Miller said. her voice crisp. "Take them both." We waited in the stark, bright motel room, the three of us bound together by a trauma that would forever mark our lives. Chloe, wrapped in a shock blanket, finally spoke, her voice a broken whisper directed at Mark. "I never meant for any of this. I wanted a different life, an easier one. He made it seem so simple." It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession of a profound emptiness, a character flaw he had never seen. Mark didn't reply. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. The love he'd felt now a complicated, painful scar. Inspector Miller's radio broke the silence again. "Suspects in custody. We have the duffel bag. The merchandise is all here." A wave of visceral relief washed over me, so powerful my knees felt weak. It was over. Truly over. The following days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Dominic Russo and his fence, Vasily, were charged with a litany of crimes: grand larceny, assault, conspiracy, and threats of murder. The evidence was overwhelming. My teddy bear camera, the audio from the parking lot, Chloe's testimony, and the jewelry found in their possession sealed their fate. They would be off the streets for a very long time. Chloe, in exchange for her full cooperation and testimony against Dominic, was offered a plea deal: theft, conspiracy, and fraud. She would serve time, but a fraction of what she could have faced. On the day she was sentenced, Mark and I sat in the courtroom. She looked small in her jumpsuit, her face stripped of makeup and arrogance. When she was led away, she glanced back at Mark one last time. There was no expectation of forgiveness in her eyes, only a bleak acceptance of the consequences. The door closed behind her with a solid, final thud. The silence in our lives afterward was profound. The house was quiet again, but the peace was different now, earned through fire. Mark moved back home for a while, the wound of betrayal still too fresh for him to face an empty apartment filled with ghosts. We didn't speak of it much. We didn't need to. We found solace in the simple, mundane routines of life. Making coffee, reading the paper, tending the garden. We were healing, slowly. One evening, a few months later, I was in my bedroom, putting away laundry. My gaze fell upon the teddy bear, still sitting in the armchair. I walked over and picked it up, its soft fur a stark contrast to the hard truth it had held. I didn't see a spy device anymore. I saw the gift from my Robert, the man who had tried so hard to protect me, even from beyond the grave. I carried the bear downstairs to the living room, where Mark was building a fire. Without a word, I placed it on the mantelpiece, a silent sentinel. He looked at it, then at me, and gave a slow, understanding nod. It was no longer a secret to be hidden. It was a part of our story now, a testament to the fact that even the softest, most trusted things can hold the sharpest truths. The nightmare was over. The thieves were behind bars. The heirlooms were back in their box, their legacy secured. And my son and I, bound by a love that had been tested and shattered and painstakingly rebuilt, were finally, truly, safe. We had faced the monster in our midst, and we had won.